यशोदानन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जन यमुनातिरावनचारि जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमद हिज डिवाइन ग्रेस एसी भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी शिल प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Tim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashthaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Does any of the brahmachari have a coin? At least to tighten it. Okay. So we're reading from Srimad Bhagvatam, Canto 6, Chapter 3, Text 31. Tasmat Sankirtanam Vishnor Jagan Mangalamam Hasam Mahatam Apiko Ravya Vidhyayekantika Nishkritam Tasmat Sankirtanam Vishnor Jagan Mangalamam Hasam Mahatamapiko Ravya Vidhyayekantika Nishkritam Tasmat Sankirtanam Vishnu Jagan Mangalamam Hasam Mahatamapiko Ravya Vidhyayekantika Nishkritam. Ladies, please. Tasmat, therefore, Sankirtanam, the congregational chanting of the holy name, Vishnu, of Lord Vishnu, Jagat Mangalam, the most auspicious performance within this material world. Amhasam, for sinful activities. Mahatam api, even though very great. Kauravya, O descendant of the Kuru family. Vidhi, understand. Aikantika, the ultimate. Nushkritam, atonement. Translation and purports by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. I believe we're going to, at least I was asked to try to finish the chapter or complete the chapter. Translation, Shukadeva Goswami continued. My dear king, the chanting of the holy name of the Lord is able to uproot even the reactions of the greatest sins. Therefore, the chanting of the Sankirtan movement is the most auspicious activity in the entire universe. Please try to understand so that others will take it seriously. Purport. We should note that although Ajamila chanted the name of Narayana imperfectly, he was delivered from all sinful reactions. The chanting of the holy name is so auspicious that it can free everyone from the reactions of sinful activities. One should not conclude that one may continue to sin with the intention of chanting Hare Krishna to friends. Rather, one should be very careful to be free from all sins and never think of counteracting sinful activities by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, for this is another offense. If by chance a devotee accidentally performs some sinful activity, the Lord will excuse him, but one should not intentionally perform sinful acts. Text 32. Shrunvatam granatam viryani uddamani harirmuhu yatha sujataya bhaktya shuddhenatma vratadhivihi. One who constantly hears and chants the holy name of the Lord and hears and chants about his activities can very easily attain the platform of pure devotional service, cleanse the dirt from one's heart. One cannot achieve such purification merely by observing vows and performing Vedic ritualistic ceremonies. Next verse. Well, let me read the purport first. Chanting and hearing the holy name of the Lord and thus become ecstatic in spiritual life. Padma Purana states, Nama paradhayuktanam namani eva haranti agham avishranti prayuktani tani evartha karani cha. If one chants the Hare Krishna Mahamantra offensively, even if one chants the Hare Krishna Mahamantra offensively, one can by continuously chanting without deviation. One who becomes accustomed to this practice will always remain in a pure transcendental position, untouchable by sinful reactions. Shukadeva Goswami especially requested King Parikshit to note this fact very carefully. There is no profit, however, in executing the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies. By performing such activities, one may go to the higher planetary systems, but as stated in Bhagavad Gita 9:21, Kshine Punye Martyalokam Vishanti. When the period of one's enjoyment in the heavenly planets is terminated because of the limited extent of the results of one's pious activities, one must return to earth. Thus, there is no use in endeavoring to travel up and down in the universe. It is better to chant the holy name of the Lord so that one may become fully purified and eligible to return home back to Godhead. That is the aim of life, and that is the perfection of life. I'm going to read the translation of the next two verses, and as we discuss, I'll come to the words, because this is Shukadeva Goswami speaking, and when he said, therefore, we have to read the other verses because that's his summarization of the chapter. Devotees who always lick the honey from the lotus feet of Lord Krishna do not care at all for material activities, which are performed under the three modes of material nature, and which bring only misery. Indeed, devotees never give up the lotus feet of Krishna to return to material activities. Others, however, who are addicted to Vedic rituals because they have neglected the service of the Lord's lotus feet and are enchanted by lusty desires, sometimes perform acts of atonement. Being incompletely purified, they return to sinful activities again and again. Text 34. After hearing from the mouth of their master about the extraordinary glories of the Lord and his name, the Yamadutas were struck with wonder. Since then, as soon as they see a devotee, they fear him and dare not look at him again. When the great sage Agastya, the son of Kumbha, was residing in the Malaya hills and worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I approached him and he explained to me this confidential history. That's in the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 6th canto, 3rd chapter of the Srimad Bhagvatam, entitled Yamaraja Instructs His Messengers. So this chapter, or this verse particularly, begins with the word tasmat. So tasmat means therefore. And therefore is usually used when you're concluding something or you're with conviction. So Yamaraj, who is speaking to his devotees, his assistants, the Yamadutas, he's explained this whole chapter about the glories of chanting Krishna's name or chanting about in general, and how that chanting has such a marvelous effect that even in the life of the most sinful Ajamila, there was such a fantastic transformation. Shukadeva Goswami is narrating this story because he heard it from Agastya Muni, and he's narrating it to Parikshit Maharaj. The story of Ajamila is to support the efficacy, he explained in the beginning of the chapter, that simply by chanting of the holy name, one can be relieved of sinful reactions, all material distresses, etc. And to support that, there is a story. And the story is not just of a happy man who lived with his family and before he died, he chanted the name of Krishna. It is the story of a very Ajamila, although grew up in a very, he lost all of it because of his attraction to a prostitute. And to maintain her and to maintain a family, he engaged in all sorts of, because by performing Brahminical activity, the money that came, the wealth that came, was not sufficient to keep her happy. And he felt this is the difference between a, let's say, Brahminical household and not a Brahminical household. In a Brahminical household, he is satisfied with uh, minimalism. Few things necessary for serving Krishna and nothing extravagant. Because one of the qualities of Brahmanas is that the mind is controlled and the senses are controlled and they live simply. But in not a Brahmanical household, they feel that the happiness in the household depends upon how many things are collected. And more they collect, the more they can show others. They're always looking for an acknowledgement from others. A Brahmana is satisfied that he's not looking for acknowledgement from others. Because that's not important for him. He's satisfied within himself. But when people have things and they want to show it off so others will acknowledge them, you have such a nice gadget, you have all these nice entrapments at home, etc., then it makes them feel my happiness, acknowledgement of what I have. So naturally with this woman that Ajamila was living with, he had to keep pampering her. He felt that he should bring her new gifts, different ways of decorating the home and having so many things, and that's expensive. And by performing Brahminical work, he was not getting that kind of donations. So he engaged in plundering, cheating, stealing, etc., and lost all his Brahminical culture. And he was so enamored by her to such a degree that he had a son who was a toddler when he was 80 years old. And so he's at this stage where lying down in bed, coughing, about to die, and his little toddler son is running around the house. And by the way, his name happens to be Narayana. So one, I'm sure we've discussed this, so I don't mean to repeat it. But one thing is, even if his Brahminical culture was lost, somewhere there was some vestige of it, very little bit, that he could name his son Narayana. He could have named his son whatever, any name. So that is what came to his protection, unbeknownst to him. So at the time of death, he was not interested in calling out to the Lord. He was just interested in seeing his son. Although the moment is a very, very deterministic moment, right? Once the person dies, finished. So at the moment of death, a person who doesn't know about higher truths of life, that moment becomes, or that little time becomes the urge for fulfilling anything that is still remaining. That's why when people are have any final wish. And people ask for all sorts of things in the final moments. We've heard of a story when one of the devotees, they were in a Harinam party. This was in New York. You heard this? So they come out of the train, just gathered on the platform, and there's a man who's about to die. And so everyone's looking, and someone in the crowd asks the person who's dying, "Do you need anything? Do you have any last wishes? You want?" And he says, "Yeah, I want a cigarette." The cigarette, gives it to him. He takes a puff. He says, "Anything else?" And the final words that came out of his mouth are, "Sally, Sally." He's pining for his girlfriend, I believe, or whoever. And he left his body. So his unfulfilled, in Ajamila's case, his unfulfilled desire was to still have these loving exchanges, if you will, with his son Narayana. So he called out to his son, Narayana, Narayana. And as we know, Vishnu Duta showed up, the Yamaduta showed up. There was this wonderful discussion, and there was a transformation in Ajamila's life. So after narrating this pastime, Shukadeva Goswami therefore and concludes, therefore, Tasmat Sankirtanam Vishnu, congregational chanting of Lord Vishnu's name, Jagat Mangalam, is the most auspicious activity in the entire universe. That means there isn't anything higher or better. And the other side of it is Mahatamapi. Mahatamapi means even the greatest of Amhasam, even the greatest of sin. Nishkratika Nishkritam is the removal. Nishkritam means atonement. Now here's an important thing. Anything that we do, especially mistakes or offenses or transgressions, etc., we need to atone for them. And without atoning, atonement is a way of accepting responsibility for the misbehavior. So as devotees, it's not that we don't atone. We do. But how we atone is important. So most people, their atonement is to be forgiven for the reaction of that misbehavior. As devotees, our atonement is even for such behavior to happen in the future. That's the difference. And that tendency can only be removed by Krishna's holy name or Krishna's mercy coming from chanting of the holy name. So there's a difference between atonement and transformation. We're looking for a transformation. The heart transformation is that I have turned away from Krishna. And because I've turned away from Krishna, everything that I do has some material consequence. And that material consequence favorable and most of the time seems. And interesting is material reactions. What seems favorable today, next day is unfavorable. And what might seem unfavorable today remains unfavorable tomorrow. That things don't change that way. But the transformation is that if I turn towards Krishna. And the energy that helps us turn towards Krishna is the chanting of the holy name. Because it is Krishna's. It is Krishna, not Krishna. It is Krishna. So he's being very emphatic, tasmat, therefore, that this is the only way. And it's important to emphasize this because the tendency to perform other ritualistic ceremonies is quite high. Now, ritualistic ceremony, specifically here, is the Vedic rituals of atonement. But we can also say that those who don't come from a Vedic background or ritualistic background, even they have some other rituals, certain habits. And those habits are also not the solution. In different cultures, you see different methods of atonement. Like in Catholicism, right? Who goes to church, confess. It's a ritual. It is meant to bring about a sense of regret in the person. Oh, I have sinned, such and such. And the Lord's compassion is such that He forgives. That's a ritual. And then the person comes back the next week. Or in the so-called Hindu or Vedic culture, there are certain atonements, some rituals that they perform. Fire yagyas, some mantras are chanted, brahmanas are invited, charity is given, fasting is done, and the next week the person does the same things again. So there isn't a transformation. Transformation comes only from chanting of Krishna's name. And the Yamadutas, they have been instructed to never go to any person who's chanting Krishna's name. Like yesterday or day before. Please do not bring, or please only bring to me those persons who have never chanted Krishna's name, who never offered an obeisance to Krishna, who never heard or discussed Krishna's glories, like that. So there's a nice devotee of a man in San Diego, story narrated by Narayan Prabhu. So the wife was very interested in Krishna consciousness, an aspiring disciple of a particular guru. And the husband was just supporting. He would come to the temple, but he was not really a practitioner. It just so happened that the man was diagnosed with some terrible disease. And so Narayan Prabhu went to the hospital and told the person, just chant Krishna's name. Don't worry about anything else. Just chant. And he sort of took it, oh, okay. A few days later, the man fell into coma. And he was in a comatose condition for 3 weeks. That's a long period. And all the relatives from all over the world came to be inside. The doctors were active. He was on all the machines, all the tubes and pipes, and everything was being recorded, monitored. 3 weeks later, the man comes out of coma. And he says, they came 4 times. So the doctors and nurses said, yeah, we used to come at least 4 times a day and check your meat, everything, all the vitals. No, 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 no. So the relatives also said, oh, yeah, we came on at least 4 different occasions. He said, no, no, no. They came 4 times. And he described that they were the Yamadutas. He saw them. As described in this, how Ajamila saw, exactly, he saw them. And in his comatose condition, this is all happening in his coma. And apparently in that comatose condition, he said to them, go to the altar of Krishna. So they went away. And he came out of his coma. So even in such a condition, just uttering the name of Krishna checks the Yamadutas from taking away or yanking out the subtle body from this gross body. So Prabhupada writes in the first purport, one should not, although that is there, one should not say, oh, then that's all I do. I chant in there and voila, I'm done. So we heard very long time ago that there are 2 ways of passing an exam. You know what? Yes. Okay. Maybe I'm looking for two principles when you get to an exam. Correct. One is you avoid an F. Correct. Somehow or the other, just study the minimal and avoid the F. Just make it there somehow. Or the other way is to make an A. One Prabhupada's explanation is, by studying Ajamila's life, one should not become inspired to avoid the F. In fact, one should become inspired to make an A. That just in Ajamila's case, if it is like that, then what to speak of practicing nicely? So that's the inspiration. That's the lesson from uh, that verse. And actually, this verse is a very good meditation for daily japa. This particular one. This was part of the Festival of Holy Name a couple of years ago. Then Prabhupada says one should be very careful to not misuse this principle, that by chanting of Krishna's name, all of sinful reactions are nullified. The misuse of this is, oh, very good. I continue doing my sinful behavior and I will chant Krishna's name. Then I will continue sinful behavior and I will chant Krishna's name. Because um, here he's saying, where was it? Even if one chants the Hare Krishna mantra offensively, one can avoid offenses by continuously chanting without deviation. So the tendency is to use this as sometimes we use the word, a rag. Or we do our dirty work and we use the holy name as a rag to clean up and then continue the dirty work. So the idea is, and then that is an offense against the holy name. And we've been hearing that offensive chanting removes the sinful reactions in a very, very gradual way. But along with removing those offenses in a gradual way, offensive chanting plants the seeds for more weeds to manifest. Weeds mean more anarthas to manifest. So as we hear that the root cause of all offenses is inattentive chanting. For us, we might say, well, my chanting is not attentive. Do I have no hope? We rely on trying to chant attentively. Here's the principle. Within our jurisdiction is only our ability to make an effort. We can only try. Krishna sees whether we are trying or not. Krishna is not seeing, are you successful or not? Krishna is only saying, are you trying or not you? Are we trying or not? And when he sees that we are sincere to be attentive to him, his name, then Krishna controls the mind. Krishna removes that makes the mind run away from him. Aham agyanajam tamaha nasayami atma bhavasto jnanadipena bhasvata. The knowledge that I have a very wonderful relationship with Krishna and Krishna is very, very kind and very attentive to our chanting. Is it in this chapter or the previous one where the Shukadeva Goswami describes that Krishna pays attention to anyone who's chanting his name? Second chapter. And in this case, he paid attention to Ajamila, who's not even calling Krishna. He was not interested in calling Lord Narayana, but hey, please go to him. He's calling out my name. So Krishna pays attention. And on the other side, Shukadeva Goswami says, one should not dwell or delve into Vedic ritualistic ceremonies of atonement. They're not necessary. He says, please try to understand this so others will take it seriously. He is the king, and whatever he does, others will follow. On a practical basis, sometimes, at least I faced this just recently, some personal sharing. When my away, for me, was interested in is whether or not that before he passed away, he was able to hear or chant Krishna's name. So he was not able to chant. He was in a coma condition. But he was able to hear the night before he passed away. I mean, I'm assuming he's able to hear because the holy name doesn't rely on the material condition of inability to hear. That means the soul can hear. And the whole night, uh, it was Aindu Prabhu's Kirtan because my father had difficulty with the Hare Krishna movement. Not the movement per se, but the Hare Krishna teaching. Because he, for the past 45 years, has been a very, very ardent student of impersonalism. And in fact, he was so learned that when I used to study Bhagvatam with him, I never had to read English translations or anything. I would just recite Sanskrit and he would understand. His ability to know the language and say things, and in fact, very extremely learned. And the visits that I've made, somehow because I was there and I used to read and recite something, he developed an attraction for Lord Nrsingadev in my. And so every day, about 3 or 4 times, we would recite this beautiful stotra called Lakshmi Narsimha Karavalamba Stotra. Just like Brahma Samhita, the fourth line is this refrain, Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. In that stotra, the fourth line is Lakshmi Narsimha Mamadehi Karavalambam. That, oh my dear Lord Lakshmi Narsimhadev, please extend your hand and pick me up. That's what the line means. And we used to recite that every day. So he had difficulty. But I have a copy of the Bhagavad Gita I had gifted him long ago. And it has all these underlining and markings of objections and the things that didn't gel for him. Question mark here, why like this, I mean, that's his notes. At least he attempted to study, that was something that I appreciated. It didn't stick with him much. But among all of this, somehow he was very attracted to Aindur Prabhu's Kirtan. He's trained in music, he likes music. I mean, he's very learned in music, all that. But he really liked Aindur Prabhu's Kirtan. He would not let me play anything. He would just, that Aindur Prabhu Kirtan? Like that. So the night before he passed away, the whole night, as soon as I came, I just played Aindur Prabhu's Kirtan for him. And it was about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I wanted to chant japa also. So I turned on Prabhupada's japa for him to hear, and myself, I was holding his hand and chanting. He was in this coma condition while I was chanting, holding his hand, Prabhupada's Kirtan playing right by his ear. I was chanting japa, and suddenly his eyes opened, mouth opened, and that's it. Everything just shut down. That was the last moment. And for me, that was more significant than anything else. It didn't matter how we performed the ceremonies after that. It just didn't matter. Somehow a devotee came and he helped us through the cremation and all of that. But after that, for the supposed 13-day period, I faced a lot of challenge. It was sufficient that the deities are offered bhoga in his name, and all the devotees, they take prasadam and send him wonderful wishes that Yeah, that was sufficient for me. For family members, for my uncles and all that, they were very uncomfortable. And I'm sharing this because somewhere for all of us, it'll come to use, especially for those who are from India or you have other ways by which we take care of the departed. I wanted all the ceremonies to be done in a particular way. So here's the principle why it is done. It's bear with me. It's important to know. It is understood in the smarta way uh, that any person, which by the way is true, but doesn't apply to the realm of devotional service. So a person who has left the body, it is described that the subtle body needs to be delivered to the Pitraloka, to the planet of the forefathers. And that Pitraloka is where Yamaraj and other personalities of the different lineages they reside. And that personality wants to go to Pitraloka. From there, they are taken to other places like Yamaraj's abode and they take birth again. So that period between when the is cremated and when they get delivered to Pitraloka, the subtle body is called Preta. Preta means ghost actually, but Preta, subtle body. And that subtle body has to be delivered to the Pitraloka. Right? Prabhupada describes the word Putra means Putanama, from the son who delivers the father from the hell called Put. Putta Nama Trayate iti Putra. So it's the responsibility of the son to deliver the father or mother from that condition of being in a subtle state, preta. Because without a gross body, one cannot perform karmic activities. So then there are all these rituals, you have to offer pindas. Basically, they're thirsty and hungry. I'm simplifying it. That in the subtle form, the departed personality is hungry and thirsty. So they have to be offered food and water by the sun while it takes 11 or 12 days to get to Pitraloka. Because Yamaraj has to accept there. So other Vayu, Varuna, Indra, they all have to be appeased to take the person there. And for me, that personally for me, that was not too important because there was chanting. And to whatever degree, although imperfectly, the son is trying to be a devotee of Krishna. So that was more than sufficient. So we were in this dilemma to do or not to do. Because if we do, then it becomes like, everyone should, it's okay to do. If you don't do, then not only the family will be up in arms, but their whole sense of appreciation for the Hare Krishna, I guess, movement and what we're doing goes away. So I consulted with senior devotees and spiritual master, and the recommendation was take the middle path. Take the middle path is get a Vaishnava to do those ceremonies. Because Lord Chaitanya also did in Gaya for his father, but the Vaishnava did those ceremonies. So understanding is proper. So we tried to find a Vaishnava who could help, and somehow we did the ceremonies. And when the Vaishnava first came, because in our family there's a particular way of doing it, and this Vaishnava had a different way of doing it, the family was all disturbed. Oh, this is not right. This is not right. But somehow they said, all right, it's your father. Ultimately, you're the decision maker. We have to, respect that. And I was like, no, I want the Vaishnava to do it. Whatever it takes the Vaishnava to do it. So they were sort of used to complain and whine on the side, not to me directly. But I knew that was going on. But interestingly, the Vaishnavas, they did so well. The ceremonies were so well that at the end of it, whether or not the preta was delivered to Pitruloka, for me, already the success happened. But the effect of Vaishnavas doing it properly was that my uncles, they came up to me and said, I must say, in the beginning we thought, and generally they say Vaishnavas means, loosey-goosey. It's a choice that they did so well. They did all the mantras perfectly. They recited everything nicely. Everything was orderly. Everything was well done. I'm very, very impressed by the Vaishnavas. I said, oh, thank you. That's very meaningful that you would express this way. And that appreciation went even further. So my uncle invited us, please come to our house for a meal. So I said to my uncle, no, thank you. Because if you have to invite me, there's a lot of trouble for you. Because you have to cook in a particular way, and I don't want to bother you. They're all 70 plus, 75 plus. And I said, no, no, no. For you, we will cook exactly the way you. Surprised and amazed that my uncle and aunt, both of them, showered. Of course, they shower every day, but the way they showered, put on dhoti, the way we put on, smeared themselves with tilak. My aunt took a bath and wore a silk sari, and they cooked. Everything was washed, cleaned, done so nicely. And when I came to their house, they put it on nice plate, the bhoga, took me to their puja room. Please make an offering. Whatever you need, we'll do for you. Asked my uncle, wow, what made you do all this? He said, I saw the Vaishnavas. I was impressed. I said, once in a while, it's nice for me to do like that too. So the middle road had that benefit. Any other ritualistic benefit? Here is saying it's not necessary because chanting of the name of Krishna takes care of anything else and everything else. And that conviction, we need to exercise it on others or not. Our internal faith about the problem with Vedic, not just Vedic, the problem with ritualistic approach to atonement is that here Prabhupada describes the one will come back to the same condition of misery that they had originally started to try to get relief from. Kshine punye martyalokam vishanti. Kshina means to finish. Punya, martyaloka, this earthly realm. So getting elevated to higher planets within this universe, even if it is the highest planet, it doesn't no meaning. It's like the two examples. If let's say one is shackled, there are two persons and they're shackled, and if they compare notes, I have golden shackle, you only have iron shackle. It doesn't mean anything. Both are shackled. Whether you have iron shackle or golden shackle. But to rely and say, my shackle glitters a little bit more, it doesn't make it. Or there's another saying that if you're drowning in water, right, or 50 feet over your head, can you say that this drowning is better than that drowning? Drowning is drowning. So to say, I'm not interested in Swargaloka, I'm interested in Tapaloka. It's the same thing. Kshine Punye, come back to this material realm, or this earthly realm. So idea is to shoot for an A, and that is to Godhead, to Vaikuntha. And the only way to get there is through devotional service, chanting of Krishna's name. That's the. And then the last verse, this is a nice verse, that the devotees, Krishnangri Padma Madhu Lin. Madhu Lin means just immersed in the honey that is emanating from Krishna's lotus feet. Na punar visrushramate. Na punar, enjoyment in materialistic activities. Guneshu, Maya Guneshu, or anything that is from the three modes of material nature. Ramate. There's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita, 5th chapter. Correct? Do you know? About Ramate. Yehi samsparshaja bhoga dukkha yonaya evate adi antavanta kaunteya nateshu ramate buddha. For those who are intelligent, Buddha, they do not na ramate, things that are within this material realm. And this within the material realm are products of the three modes of material nature. Samsparshaja bhoga. Samsparshaja means the sense of happiness that comes from contact of the senses with, and they understand this is not where pleasure is, because all this happiness has a beginning and an end. That's one characteristic. And second, dukkha yonaya evate. They are convinced happiness is the source of misery. Dukkha yona. Yoni means the womb. Dukkha yoni means is the womb of, or the source of all misery. Dukkha yonaya evate. So such persons, they take pleasure in the source of all pleasure, Lord Ramachandra. That's the chapter. Any comments or questions? You'd like to add something?
On the topic of transformation,
Yeah.
you're saying atonement doesn't transform. It takes responsibility for a particular wrong action, but it doesn't transform. So on that topic,
Only atonement doesn't transform.
yeah, only atonement alone power. So a devotee's atonement is for transformation, not just for. So I was, and kind of in connection to the message we were hearing about yesterday, about Yamaraj. He was apologizing. And basically the mistake that the Yamadutas made was they were not able to recognize, in the case of Ajamil, that actually a transformation had taken place just by his chanting the holy name of Krishna. Although apparently it didn't seem so, because his lifestyle kind of remained somewhat. But a transformation had in fact taken place in his heart, and that's what we were heard to and so on. So I was wondering, this Ajamil's case, of course, is a unique one, but I still feel like an important one, because when we hear like the story of Magari the hunter, that's a transformation that's easily recognizable. He went from a hunter and so on to making sure even the ants weren't stamped on. So then we can recognize here's a person who's been transformed, his work, and we glorify. But in the case of someone like Ajamil, the transformation isn't apparent, but it had also taken place, although not apparent. So how do we get insight into what it means to really be transformed? And I'm remembering another verse from the Bhagavad Gita, the Shipram Bhavati Dharmatma verse. And, yeah, so in the commentary of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he gives an analogy how medicine, when someone takes a medicine, that it may not act immediately,
right,
but there is no concern anymore about the disease, although the disease is still apparent. There's no more concern about it, because in due course it will take place. So in the same way, someone who's maybe involved in activities which are not very, they're sinful or unfavorable and so on, but those are not of any more concern. Once a person is taking to the chanting of the holy name, etc., soon the transformation will take place. So how do we saw our tendency to understand transformation in terms of something externally appreciable, especially in terms of like pious moral life, versus something that is actually taking place but not so easily recognizable on account of it's going to take time or else just is not perceivable to the mundane senses.
Using Prabhupada's example, what Prabhupada said, that even after you disconnect the fan, you pull the plug, you still see the blades rotating. So when you pull the plug, the transformation has already happened. But in due course of time, it slows down. Now, if you see, if the fan is very small, the moment you pull the plug, it comes to standstill very quickly. And bigger the fan gets, a big fan is like let's say, a nuclear turbine. You pull the plug, it takes many days to even slow down. So in Mrigari's case, things happened very quickly. Information was done, and everything manifested like that. In some cases, it takes longer, but the transformation has happened. So it's a spectrum. It's a gradual spectrum, and to a lot it depends. And not in the case of Ajamila anymore, but now generally speaking, it depends on the strength of attachment. With Mrigari, he dropped everything. In the case of Prachini Bari, it took longer. First, there's the whole description, why I didn't understand, and there's a story, then analogy is explained. Oh, then he took him some more time. The same Narada Muni speaking. In the case of Dhritarashtra, it never happened. I was reading in the 10th canto that Krishna sends Akrura to go meet with Dhritarashtra and check how things are going and warn Dhritarashtra because friends, the Pandavas, treated well. And when he goes there, Kunti Devi opens her heart and cries because her sister or his sister. And he warns Dhritarashtra, please don't treat the sons of Pandu badly, because the consequences will be very severe. And that's a classical, yeah, but Dhritarashtra says, your words are so amazing. They're powerful, they're potent. But son, and I can't help it. So for him it didn't happen. So transformation, like we know, has two sides. One is the potency or the mercy of Krishna, and the other side is the receiving of it. The easier, the sooner, or the better our receptivity, the faster or quicker the transformation. So it depends on how quickly they're received. For Ajamila, the reception was when the Vishnu Dutas and the Yamadutas were having this conversation. And then his change was, he had to go back to Haridwar and very intensely practice his devotional service. That's mine. It depends on our receptivity. Then there's another phenomenon that we may have left some particular anartha or attachment. And here we are, there's a transformation that has happened, and we are happily going on in our devotional life. But at some point in our devotional life, if our sense of submission or connection with Guru and Krishna slackens or things change, then we go back to the same old attachments. They sprout up again. And sometimes so people go back to the same things, the same old bad habit. Because it's a matter of what was being received, now is person is not receiving. And when it's not, the tendency to get pulled by the modes of nature is very strong. Does that address? But it is tough. No one's. Yeah.
Transformed individual, but he was killing demigods.
Yeah.
and so it seems like there's a great challenge.
Yeah. And Bhishma Dev was on this side fighting the Pandavas, who's on Krishna's side. Then there is a plan of the Lord also involved. And they understand how to participate in the plan of the Lord. And that's the transformation. One of the elements of transformation is to know how to be an instrument of the Lord. Otherwise, the non-transformed is that I'm an independent source of everything, versus I'm an instrument of Krishna. Maybe a good discussion would be, what are the characteristics of transformation? Just for us to understand and look at the lives of other devotees. How does characteristics? There are 6 characteristics of pure devotional service. That's a transformational list. But there are other things too we can look at. Bhakta Lok. You want to add something on this point? Well, Luke's waiting for a question. So unless you want to add something to this point. Okay. Sorry.
And I'm trying to reconcile. So here is, I'm thinking about the Yamadutas. Ajamila was transformed. So this whole pastime, Yamadutas, who are the servants of a Mahajan, 12 Yamaraj, firstly they don't understand the theology of the holy name, which is sort of a little enigmatic. But then my realization was, well, everybody needs, there is training and then further training and then further training. So when the time is right, they get the training. And the Yamadutas, they were mesmerized, they were amazed by the Vishnudutas. And then so their heart is a little open. Then they come to Yamaraj and they ask these questions. And they hear, all the glories about the holy name. So it seems to me that, oh wow, so now they can do their service properly of who to bring to Yamaraj and who not to bring. But at the end, the last verse was like, wow. They were saying, Prabhupada writes, that they feared Vaishnavas. Yeah, so they feared Vaishnavas. So it seems like they had association. They also understood the theology of holy name, but they did not take up the process of bhajana kriya. Or is their service is that to protect the service that they have to do, or their service to the Mahajan, Yamaraj, is that their bhajana kriya? Hey, so I'm just sort of sitting with it as to why would they. Prabhu says they feared Vaishnavas. They would not even dare to go near the Vaishnavas. I'm just Bhagavatam is what Bhagavatam is, but I'm just sitting with it basically.
So the purport says, since this incident, the Yamadutas have given up the dangerous behavior of approaching devotees. For the Yamadutas, a devotee is dangerous. My understanding of it is, even after one's knowledge about Krishna has awakened, it is not necessary that one has to change their occupation. That's their occupation. Otherwise, Yamaraj himself is in Yamaloka doing this job of punishing. We say that even Durga Devi or every demigod has a particular function that they are performing. So it's not like now that they know of Vishnu, they're still performing their occupation, but with a better sense of understanding who to approach, who not to approach. So the principle we can appreciate is, as we perform devotional services and we hear properly from Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, our occupational engagements become refined and they become perfect actually. So they have respect for the devotees. They hear the dangerous, for the Yamadutas, devotees are dangerous in the sense the fear is out of respect. Oh, it's a devotee. I should not approach a devotee. That's not that the life is threatened, the danger that, oh, I saw a devotee, it's dangerous. Is this, oh, this is not someone that I can mess with. Awe and reverence. Thank you. Hello? Oh,
Point, how can a devotee be dangerous for somebody?
danger is that one would not want to mess with the devotee because Krishna is protecting them. Like,
So, sorry, go ahead.
like let's say the story of Vrikasura and Lord Shiva. He got all these benedictions from Lord Shiva that if I touch someone's head, it should blow up into 1,000 pieces. Oh, so be it. But he wanted to now test it on Lord Shiva. That was dangerous. You shouldn't. Like that. It's risky to mess with the devotees. Acharyanist. Do we have time? It's 8:37. Should stop, no? Oh, till 9 now. Till 9 o'clock.
My question was about the verse. It seems to be indicating Tasmat Sankirtanam Vishnu Jagan Mangalam Amhasam Mahatam Apikorva. That because it's, or as it's translated here, because the holy name of the reactions to the greatest sins is being particularly glorified, that therefore this is the most auspicious activity. So it's just, it sounds to me a little bit like the discussion of Haridas Thakur and the Brahmin, that's only a side effect.
Right.
That's the result of Namabas chanting. So the real value of the holy name awakens the whole God. So I'm just trying to understand from this verse, it seems to be glorifying the Sankirtan because it removes those sinful reactions. But that's not really the main glorification of the holy name.
Right.
And when we go for chanting in Sankirtan, people, they may chant the holy name. So from the discussion, we're understanding they're getting cleansed from sinful reactions, which is incredible. It's wonderful. It's glorious. At the same time, if they chant the name and then they go on with their life in Kali Yuga, they simply continue to accrue heaps and heaps of very degraded sinful reactions. So how can we get more faith that this, by chanting the name, they're going to get this lasting and the higher benefit ultimately? Because the cleansing of sinful reactions is not ultimately such a big, there's different ways they could do that. If they go take a dip in the Ganga or something.
But they won't. They won't take a dip in the Ganga, but they will hear a Harinam.
Yeah.
Our faith is from Ajamila's story, but our faith in the words of the Shastra, that if it says it does, it does. We don't go into everyone's lives that we meet on the street to find out, oh, at the time of their death, what happened. But we know that at the time of their death or somewhere, for hearing the holy name or having chanted, however, there is some benefit, and that benefit will definitely manifest. How it will manifest is in Krishna's hands. Thank you. How it will manifest is in Krishna's hands. But it's not that it will not, it will manifest. It may be lying under heaps of, sinful activity, as you put it.
Benefit is the bhakti sukriti that develops from that.
That is correct.
It's just the discussion seems particularly in the last few descriptions of the chanting highlighting how it relieves one from sinful activities, which is
So the point is not about relief from sinful activity only, because there's other verses in Bhagavatam second canto, oh, Shrotavya Kirtitavyascha Ichchatam Akuto Bhayam. Oh, fearlessness. I want to be fearless. No fear. That's Krishna's name. No, the idea is that these things are impediments in devotional life. So, chanting of the holy name not only gives the topmost benefit, but removes the impediments. That means you don't need anything outside of chanting to help. Yesham tvantagatam papam jananam punya karmanam te dvandva moha nirmuktanam bhajante mam dridavata. So removal of sinful reactions is important. But you don't need something else. I had one Bhakti Vriksha member many years ago. I asked, "Are you chanting?" I said, when I'm chanting, my mind is too distracted, waiting for the mind to be a little calm before I can start chanting. I said, you don't need something else. You don't need to perform pranayam or go to the, some quiet place. It's not the chanting itself, not only removes these obstacles while it gives us benefit. But there are statements from Shastra. You see once Lord Jagannath on the chariot and you're liberated. I mean, they are liberated. Even if they see Jagannath, they see the back of the chariot to see Jagannath. Yeah, they see the back of the chariot during Rath Yatra. Go back to Godhead. They're liberated. Jai. Coming up. That's correct. To the question.
In a reply to Maharaj Parikshit's question, the second point we discussed is that the whole narration is actually a glorification of Shuddhanam by it's called Kaimutya Nyaya, the logic of it also. That if by doing this, this can happen,
How
and
much
what to
more?
speak of this? If you invest $100, you get $100,000 back. What to speak of investing so much more? So it's really a question of pure holy name and its result, a love of God, more than it is a glorification of Namabas. But a glorification of the pure holy name by glorifying Namabas. That's the other point. And the other thing is we spent 2 days reading through Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary to verse 9 and 10 in chapter 2, which Prabhupada also summarizes at the end of that chapter. And it took us 2 days to go through it, an hour and a half each. And there he also describes how when one chants the holy name, then the seed comes. And that seed of bhakti is imperishable and it's not affected by sin. But in order for the seed to gain fruit, to actually grow and deliver the fruit, then such a person who's gotten that seed just by one time hearing and chanting the holy name will continue to take birth so that that seed of bhakti can actually bear fruit.
That is
So
correct.
then he quotes a few verses from the Bhagavatam, one from the 5th chapter of the 1st canto, saying that such a person will continue to take birth, but not like the karmis, not like ordinary karmis who are taking birth on account of sinful reactions, but he takes birth so that the seed that is there now is given the opportunity to actually bear the full fruit. And therefore, we should not perceive that they're taking birth like an ordinary materialistic person. So someone may be having chanted Namabas or having heard the holy name in the street, and they continue on with their sinful, like in the case of Ajamil. And then, well, minimally, we will suspect that the seed of bhakti has come, that hearing, but in order for it to now bear fruit, they will continue to take birth.
It is an
And
eternal
get that
impression. It's not a karmic impression. It's an eternal impression that stays and stays till the environment plus the person's receptivity for the seed to germinate. Thank you. Mhm.
Somehow we get opportunity to meet the devotees or come in contact with them.
An opportunity, but again, two things are there. The opportunity will arise, and the receptivity to that opportunity must also arise. Then it will, both are there. Right in the first canto, we hear from Prabhupada that for a child to be born, the father needs to be potent and the mother, or when you plant a seed in the ground, the seed should be potent and the land should be fertile. Then it will happen. And in the discussion of Bhagavatam, the speaker must be proper, must also be proper. Then, until then, it's there. It's eternally there.
Bad work or some abominable thing, that seed remained dormant up to what he had continued.
It's not seed. For a devotee, the seed may have germinated into a creeper of bhakti. And then if they stop watering the creeper of bhakti, then it stays where it is until they come back to water it again, whichever life. Either that life or future life. But that's that credit. We heard from creeper, there may be 4 leaves, someone's creeper, there may be 100,000 leaves, but they may have done something. It still remains that way. When they come back, they start from there. It doesn't mean that they don't have to do uh, sadhu sangha, bhajana kriya. They have to, but it helps them move quickly to that point again. I heard once that when we see that certain persons they take up devotional service very quickly, some people don't take up so quickly, and after some time, some people who take up slowly, but then they move very fast. Someone else, although they take up quickly, they move slowly. Some take up quickly, some move fast. And for all of those persons, or many of those, they will come to a point where things will slow down to a little like that. Generally, that's an indication that that is where somewhere it was left off. From there on, they have to work for it. Yes, Prabhu. To Bhakti direct.
What determines somebody's receptivity, and how can we increase our receptivity?
The word used by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is yadrichaya, somehow or the other. It has many things involved in it. Past this, even if one comes from a sinful background, at that moment, like Mrigari, you saw Narada, yadrichaya. Generally, we use yadrichaya, somehow or the other is called causeless mercy, or different ways in which it's explained. But for each person, it's different. You can't say why I took that book from that devotee, why I went to the Sunday feast in the first place. We don't know. Sometimes the comes without our knowing. A little prasadam, or the mouse that ate the ghee. Actually, the ghee was burning, and because it was burning and he was eating the ghee, some fiber of cotton got stuck, and so he was moving his head with the ghee like this. So it was accepted as his offering arati. Offer like that only. But that's where it depends. Yadricha, somehow or the other. There's receptivity there. And different things. Past pious activities. Past sukruti, that's maybe there. Past bhakti pious activities. Etc., by which some tiny receptivity is there. It's the beginning, adav shraddha. Sometimes even a faithless person will, for some reason, somehow or the other, the devotees will engage them, either knowingly or unknowingly. Some people are walking on the street and the devotee gives them a card, they look at it, oh, the Hare Krishna. Like that, some different ways. Huh? There's one devotee who used to be in this temple. He used to stand outside the building on the sidewalk, and he would stand like this, not let anyone pass by. And they would all be in the rush to get to the you do it. But he would, you can't pass till you say Hare Krishna. Can't pass till you say Hari Bol. And they were like, Hare Krishna. You have perfected your life. Like that. Anyway. Thought of actually reading something, but I don't think I have time. Today is the appearance day of Srimati Sita Devi, the consort of Lord Ramachandra. Today is also the appearance day of Srimati Jannava Devi, the consort of Lord Nityananda. And so I was going to read something from it. We have 8 minutes. Should I? It's also the disappearance of Madhu Pandit Prabhu. Thankfully, no fasting. It's also Prahlad Narasimha's birthday and Gaura Govinda's birthday as well. His is Vedic birthday, his is Roman calendar birthday. Here is about Sri Jannava Devi. Shri Varuni Revata Vamsha Sambhave Tasya Priye Dve Vasudha Cha Jannavi Shri Suryadasasya Mahatman Hasute Kakudma Rupasya Cha Surya Tejasaha. Translation. Balaram's wives Varuni and Revati became Vasudha and Jannavi, the two wives of Nityananda Prabhu in Chaitanya Leela. Both of them were the daughters of Suryadas, who was as effulgent as the sun. He was Kakud, father of Revati in his previous birth. According to another opinion, Jannava was the incarnation of Ananga Manjari. Both these opinions are possible, as we have shown that more than one identity can be joined in associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is from Gaura Deepika. Jannava's father was Sarakhel. According to Gaudiya Vaishnava Abhidhana, her mother Bhadravati. Suryadas Shripat is in the village of Shaligram, which is not far from Nabadvip, close to the Muragacha station on the Eastern Railway. Suryadas was the third son of Kamsari Mishra. His older brothers were Damodar and Jagannath, his younger brothers Gauridas, Krishnadas, and Narsingha Chaitanya. Suryadas Pandit made his home in Shaligram, not far from Navadvip. He held an important post in the service of the king of Gauda, as a result of which he was given the title Sarakhel, commander. That is our Sarakhel. And earned a large amount of money. Suryadas and his brothers were all pure in their character and they had a spotless reputation. His virtues are innumerable. His daughters were Vasudha and Jannava. I'll read this one section of Lord Nityananda's wedding and we'll stop. Narahari Chakravarti Thakur has written about Jannava's holy life at length in Bhakti Ratnakara. Every manifestation of Vishnu Tattva has three energies which are known as Shri, Bhu and Neela or Leela. Nityananda Prabhu is also Vishnu Tattva and possesses these three energies. In the 12th Taranga of the Bhakti Ratnakara, Lord Nityananda is taking place according to human custom. The essence of that description is as follows. A certain Kayastha named Krishnadas, the son of Harihor of Borgachi, a village near Shaligram, had the responsibility of seeking a wife for Nityananda Prabhu. A certain elderly Brahmin from Shaligram saw that Suryadas was worried about finding a suitable husband for his two daughters and made the following suggestion. Quote, in the village of Ekachakra in Rarhadesh are a couple named Harai Pandit and Padmavati Devi. They were Vasudev and Rohini in their previous roles in Krishna Leela. Balaram has appeared as their son, Nityananda. Nitai traveled to all the places of pilgrimage and performed many austerities and became a great scholar before coming to Navadvip and becoming Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's dearest associate. He is the eternal husband of your two daughters. End quote. In a dream, Suryadas also had a vision of Nityananda as Balaram standing to his left and right in their forms as Revati and Varuni. When Suryadas took the Brahman's advice seriously and offered the two girls to Nityananda's lotus feet, Nityananda Prabhu mercifully gave him the same vision directly. Suryadas fainted in ecstasy. This is from Bhakti Ratnakara. He saw Vasudha and Jandava as Varuni and Revati, whose forms were more effulgent than mountains of gold and kumkum. Standing to the left and right of Balaram, they were decorated in magnificent jewelry and bedecked in fine colorful clothes. Nityananda revealed this magnificence to his devotee in order to give him joy, and Suryadas completely forgot ecstasy. The Adivasa rituals of Krishnadas Sarkil in Shaligram. All the Brahmins of Boragachi and Shaligram. The fortunate Suryadas Sarkil gave his two daughters away to Nityananda Prabhu according to the religious rites and popular custom. At Sachi Mata's request, Nityananda Prabhu stayed for some time in Navadvip after his wedding in Shantipur, Uddharan Datta, and then established a permanent residence on the banks of the Ganges. Jannava Devi herself had no sons, but Nityananda's other Shakti, Vasudha Devi, gave birth to Virabhadra Goswami and Ganga Devi, who are incarnations of Kshirodakshai Vishnu and the river Ganges respectively. According to Gaura Ganadesha Deepika, Ganga Devi's husband Madhvacharya is an incarnation of King Shantanu, who married the goddess Ganga Devi in the Mahabharata. And there's a little bit more. Yeah. Jannava Devi's travels are described in the 11th Taranga of Bhakti Ratnakara. While traveling from Kheturi to Vraja, she stopped in a prosperous village where she delivered some atheists, unbelievers, and criminals and bestowed Krishna Prema upon them. When she arrived in Vrindavan, she saw the Samadhi of Gauridas Pandit, which moved her to tears. When in Vrindavan, the leaders of the Vaishnava community such as Jiva Goswami, Gopal Bhatta Goswami, Loknath Goswami, Bhugarbha Goswami, and Madhu Pandit all came to offer her their respectful greetings. In the company of these Vaishnavas, she visited the principal temples of Vrindavan, Madan Mohan, Govinda, and Gopinath, before going to Radhakund. There she met Raghunath Das Goswami, who was engaged in constant chanting of the holy names and whose body was emaciated by his austerities. Janava remained in Radhakund for 3 days, engaged in bhajan, while sitting on the banks of the Kund, and had a vision of Sri Krishna that overwhelmed her with waves of love. The ghat where Janava bathed and had this vision is known today as Sri Jannava Ghat. Then she took the company of Vaishnavas on a parikrama of Rajamandala. During this parikrama, she heard Jiva Goswami lecture on Brihad Bhagavatamrita. On the return journey to Gauradesh, Jannava visited numerous villages. She spent 3 or 4 days in Kheturi, sometime in Budari, the place of Nityananda's birth in Ekachakra. These are related to the associates of Lord Chaitanya. I won't skip that. So Lord Nityananda's birthplace is Ekachakra. Katwa, where Mahaprabhu took sannyas and where she met Yadunandanacharya. Jajigram, Srinivasacharya's home village. Srikhanda, the home of Raghunandan Thakur, son of Narahari Sarkar Thakur. Navadvip, Ambika, Saptagram, where she visited Uddharan Datta's house before finally returning to Kardaha. There she recounted the story of her entire voyage to Vasudha and Virabhadra Goswami. By Janava Devi's mercy, Nityananda's dear associate Parameshwari Das Thakur was fortunate enough to see Gopinath united with Radharani in Vrindavan. When he returned to Kardaha and told Janava and Vasudha what he had seen, Janava was overwhelmed with feelings of prema. She instructed Parameshwari to go immediately to the village of Antpur and install deities of Radha and Gopinath there. Janava Devi arranged for Veerabhadra's marriage to Yadunandan Acharya's two daughters, Srimati and Narayani, who both became disciples of Jannava. Ananda Shakti, Srimati Jannava Devi, disappeared on the Shukla Navami Titha of Vaishakha. Shri Jannava Devi ki Jai, Sita Devi ki Jai, Madhu Pandit Prabhu ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada.